Can you tell when freedom turns into a cage? She wore no chains on her wrists, no locks on her doors. She left the house every day, smiled at her neighbors, paid her bills on time. Her life was neat, predictable, even admired. But something in her gaze trembled, like hands gripping too tightly what they no longer wished to hold. They called her strong, grounded, reliable. She thanked them, of course, with the grace of someone who had learned to smile with her mouth and stay silent with her eyes. But inside, something was fading. Like a flower pressed between the pages of a book no one opened anymore. It was control. Not the balanced kind, but the obsessive kind. A golden cage. No bars, but invisible walls built of fear. She needed to know things before they happened. Had a plan for every step, a map for every emotion, a justification for every action. Nothing in her life was left to chance. Because chance, for her, meant danger. A reminder that parts of her didn't know how to handle uncertainty, disorder, or vulnerability. No one saw it. But she was imprisoned, bound to the need to anticipate, to manage, to hold everything together under a threadbare idea of perfection. She believed that if everything stayed in place, the pain wouldn't return. But pain always returned, because it didn't live in chaos. It lived in control. That morning, when the mirror fell and shattered on the living room floor, she sat beside the broken glass. And for the first time, she didn't try to fix it. She just looked. And in that looking, something began. Not a collapse, a chance. She believed that controlling was a form of love. Not the light kind, but the kind that watches, anticipates, protects before anyone even asks. Since childhood, she'd learned the world was too unpredictable to leave unattended. So she made her own invisible rules. Fixed schedules, measured gestures, restrained words. She was never excessive, never late, never needy. Always the one who knew what to do, or at least performed it flawlessly. Routine became her shelter, a quiet ritual of survival. Every object in its place, every day with its purpose. There was beauty in that, and also loneliness. Because to keep everything in order, she had to exile parts of herself. The chaotic parts, the ones that change their minds, the ones that cry mid-sentence. Those she locked away so long ago she forgot where she left them. At night, her body would lie down, but her mind stayed awake, planning the next day, replaying past conversations, rehearsing possible futures to avoid being caught off guard. Rest never came fully. Joy, even less. Because even pleasure had to be pre-approved, scheduled in, measured out, justified before it could be felt. And so, slowly, the control that once protected her became what suffocated her. The day the mirror broke, she wasn't startled by the sound. She was startled by the relief. Something outside her had done what she never allowed herself to do, fall apart. Not as failure, but as ending. The end of a structure that no longer held anything real. She sat on the floor, broom untouched, shoulders slumped for the first time, and a single sentence echoed softly in her chest. I'm so tired of holding it all together. She grew up watching adults who were not allowed to fail. People who carried everything with steady faces, even when their worlds were cracking beneath them. No one said they were hurting. They just hardened. And she learned, falling is dangerous. Crying is weakness. Needing anyone means being disappointed. She built a tower inside her chest, tall, rigid, windowless. And inside it, she hid everything too fragile to be seen. Over time, control became a second skin. It wasn't a choice anymore, it was instinct. Before she felt, she was already organizing. Before she spoke, she had already edited. Before she lived, she had already prepared for the end. It was a way of never being surprised, never being thrown back into that place where she once felt too exposed, too vulnerable, too alone. Because deep down, she knew the chaos wasn't outside, it was within, and control was the last wall before collapse. But control has a cost that no one sees right away. Relationships stay shallow, breaths grow short. Joy becomes calculated, and even surrounded by people, she felt alone. because no one really knew her. They only saw the fortress, the gleam of the golden bars. Some even praised her discipline, her poise, her ability to stay fine. They had no idea that for her, being fine meant never letting anything drop. And what hurt most was that, never being able to fall. Not into herself, not into anyone. Because falling requires trust, and she no longer trusted. Not others, not the world, not even herself. There, seated among shards of the broken mirror, her hands dusted with pieces of reflection, she looked into one fragment. For the first time, she didn't see the capable one. She saw someone tired, and strangely, it didn't hurt. It was a quiet relief, the beginning of a crack. She didn't touch the mirror for days. The larger shards remained gathered in a quiet corner of the living room, half hidden by the curtain, as if waiting for something unnamed. It wasn't procrastination, it was reverence. Something inside her wasn't ready to pretend nothing had happened. For the first time, she didn't feel the urge to clean it all up, to restore the image, to erase the break. And that pause, that strange stillness, carried the weight of something sacred. She was beginning to understand that not fixing was also a form of care. As the hours passed slower than usual, she began to notice how much of her life was lived on the edge of avoidance. How often she performed yes when she meant no. How often she smiled to smooth the room instead of telling the truth. People had always called her balanced, reliable, graceful, and maybe she was. But that grace had a cost. It silenced entire parts of her that were loud, messy, and alive. Her peace had required too much silence. Her stability, too much hiding. Each night she sat on the floor with the lights off, the city's distant noises seeping through the window. And there, in the dimness, she watched the scattered reflections in the broken mirror. Each shard became a portal, a version of herself she had left behind. The one who wasn't ready. The one who felt too much. The one who asked for love without knowing how to protect herself. They looked back without blame, and something softened. Letting go, she realized, wasn't giving up. It wasn't a failure of strength. It was the decision to stop pretending that what was crumbling inside could still be upheld. It was the beginning of trust, not in others, but in her own capacity to live without the illusion of control. That evening, she picked up a single shard and placed it on the table. Not to mend, not to mourn, just to say, I see you. I see what broke, and I don't need to hide you anymore. The morning she forgot to answer a message that once would have haunted her for days, she braced herself for the familiar weight of guilt, but it didn't come. No reprimand, no rejection. The sky remained in place. The silence that followed was just silence. And she, standing in her kitchen with her hair undone and her tea half cold, felt something unexpected. Space. The beginning of space. And into that space came a quiet realization. Much of what she carried was never hers to begin with. She started to let go gently, not as a rebellion but as a return. She softened her tone with herself, allowed pauses in conversations, left the bed unmade some mornings without shame, began saying, I'm not sure, without rushing to prove otherwise. It wasn't dramatic, but it was profound. Each act of imperfection became a doorway back to something she hadn't touched in years, her own humanness, not the one shaped by discipline and performance, but the one that stumbles, hesitates, breathes unevenly, and still deserves to be held. Her body began to respond to this new rhythm. Sleep arrived like an old friend. Her steps slowed without guilt. Breakfast became an act of presence, not productivity. She played old songs again, the ones that once made her feel too much. And this time, she didn't skip them. She let the ache rise and didn't label it as weakness. It was memory. It was return. And one day, as she caught her reflection in the new mirror, still leaning against the wall, she didn't see the woman who always knew what to do. She saw someone real, someone becoming. She understood that control had always been an attempt to guarantee love. But love that must be guaranteed becomes a prison, a contract written in fear. She didn't want that anymore. She didn't want to be admired for her strength. She wanted to be known in her softness. She took the mirror shard and placed it in a wooden box, then wrote a single sentence on a folded piece of paper. "I don't need to hold everything to be held." She didn't declare change. There were no announcements, no sudden decisions. Freedom, for her, didn't arrive with a roar. It entered like mist, barely visible but slowly touching everything. The shifts were subtle. She paused before answering messages, took deeper breaths in conversations, let silence live in her home without needing to fill it with sound or structure. The world outside kept asking for urgency, but something inside her now whispered, "Not yet. Not today. Maybe never again like before." She started saying, "I'm tired," and didn't follow it with apology. She left the dishes in the sink some nights and didn't check the clock 3 times before bed. She walked slower, didn't rush to reply when asked what she wanted. Sometimes she didn't know. And for the first time, that was an answer too. Her life began to breathe. Not because she made it new, but because she stopped holding it so tightly. Old habits still whispered. Control, like an old friend with sharp edges, tried to visit. But she no longer gave it the keys. And in this gentle reclaiming, she discovered something beautiful. The golden cage still stood, but the door had been open all along. And now she could walk in and out, not with drama, but with dignity. One morning she opened a drawer and found a necklace from childhood. Small, simple, nearly forgotten. She put it on, not for style, not for meaning, but for memory. A reminder of the self that existed before the weight, before the performance, before the fear. And as it rested on her chest, light and unnecessary, she smiled. Not because she was free in every way, but because she was beginning to remember that freedom doesn't have to be loud to be true. That night, she lit a single candle on the kitchen table. Not for light, for quiet. She wanted to see things in a softer hue. The apartment was still, except for the small flicker that reflected across the wooden surface, touching the edge of the little box she had placed beside her. Inside it, the mirror shard rested, along with the folded note. She opened it slowly, not like one seeking an answer, but like one meeting something known. Read the words she had written days ago. Breathed in, held, released. For the first time, they landed not just in her thoughts, but in her body. No one had witnessed what she'd lived. There was no audience, no transformation to post or explain. What happened inside her had no name, and yet, it was everything. She realized then, the control hadn't protected her. The fear had. The control was only a shape that fear had taken, dressed in perfection and coated in praise. What she had really needed all along was space. Space to break. Space to ask. Space to not know. And now, she was finally giving herself that space. The next morning, the house remained a little out of place. A sweater slung on the couch, a book left open on the floor, a plate with crumbs from toast she didn't finish. But it no longer looked like mess. It looked like life. A life not kept in boxes, but allowed to exhale. She didn't clean it right away. She sat among it, wore her old necklace, listened to the air outside, and with nothing planned, nothing pending, nothing needing to be fixed, she opened the door. Not to escape, not to declare anything, just to feel the outside, just to feel herself move through it. And in that simple act, she knew the cage had never been locked, only believed. If you found this story, maybe there's something in you too. Tired of holding so tightly to things that no longer need to be carried. Maybe your golden cage is beautiful enough to seem like home. But your soul knows the difference, it always has. Close your eyes. Exhale slowly. Let your hands fall open. Whisper gently to yourself, "I can walk out whenever I'm ready."